What's the creepiest thing you've seen in the middle of the woods? Growing up in a rural town, we didn't have too much to do at the age of 14. Most weekends I'd spend exploring the outsides of town with a friend of mine. He a river just down to the point of it being new territory for us. This was in noon, by the way. In the bush had seemed a lot more dense and darker than what we expect. We still kept walking, but just before getting to the opening to it, we both simultaneously stopped in our tracks. I had a feeling come over me. Being extremely uneasy and anxiety-ridden, we both looked at each other and knew we both felt the exact same thing. With a little talk, we turned around and headed back hurriedly as stated, but couldn't pinpoint one thing, almost as if we had stepped over a line of sorts. Backpacking in the Yukon, we met a dude named Carl and Dawson at a free dinner put on by the town church. He asked my friend and I, both girls, where we were staying. Specific. We lied and said we were at the main campsite. We finished our dinner and tried to run out of there, but then he cornered us and offered to give us a ride back camping. There are only a few people driving back and forth, and we took a turn onto a gravel road heading north. We realized there's been a truck following us since we left town, and we especially noticed once we're on this gravel road with absolutely no service and no emergency services. There are literally no turnoffs on to a river, so running for it wasn't even worth it. My friend, she was just going to drive faster and try to pull a fast one on Carl, so we blitzed down the gravel road until we hit snow. The whole road is covered in snow and ice, and we can't go much further into the pace that she said. We see a campsite ahead of us, blitz it there and park the car on the far side of the road to hopefully confuse them, make her run for it. We saw that the campsite had a shelter in the middle. We knew we had to get warm quickly, so that the game plan was to run to the shelter to get fully dressed and prepared to sleep in a snow embankment. However, once we got to the shelter, we bumped into a family of 12 people, 8 men and 4 women. We ran into the shelter swearing, cursing and freaking out because we felt the creepy car was after us. So once we turned around and saw the faces staring at us, in amazement, we calmed down and tried to explain our situation. From the moment we uttered the words, "There's a man who's been following us for the last 100 kilometers," everyone stepped up. The men ran outside with their knives, hiking poles, bear spray, etc., and the women took us and told us to run. They had seen a dense patch of trees in the northeast corner of the campsite and knew that all of us could hide within the trees. We could hear the men yelling and telling Creepy Carl to stay away. There were loud noises, a car alarm. We knew it was our car, and then complete silence. We were in the northern part of the Yukon in the snow in minus 10 degrees Celsius weather, and we had just been followed from what we thought was just going to be a free dinner from the local church. After 30 minutes, the other women decided it was time to return to the shelter and to find the man. We returned and found the men safe and sound. Apparently, Creepy Carl had told them that we were none of their business and that we had wronged him in some sort of manner, so he broke our car window and then turned around and left. One of the guys had a car, so he had followed Creepy Carl down the road a good 15 to 20 kilometers before turning back around. The women invited my friend and I to sleep on their campsite, and we gladly obliged. We woke up the next morning safe and sound in the middle of the Yukon without cell or emergency services, and a giant appreciation for finding other humans. In the Cairn forms 2 weeks ago, the wind was reported over 100 kilometers per hour. We were in our tent from 730 at about 1900 hours. I heard a calm female. We all heard it. We were at Lockheed Shocking, which is very remote. No roads, only accessible by foot. The snow was very deep that day and it was close to a whiteout. We look around, but find nothing, no tracks, etc. But whatever it was, we heard it through the howling wind, so it had to be close. We weren't too creeped out, but we're tent, plus sometimes in the afternoon. Then in my sleep haze, I hear something rustling around. I figure it's one of my friends getting ready, so I roll over to see what the plan is, but instead of one of my buddies, I have a brown bear, not more than 2 feet away, staring straight at me. Just to have something that potentially dangerous creep up on you when you are asleep is freaking terrifying, and I had 2 more weeks of the trip to go sleeping in that hammock, one on a multinational state park trip with my girlfriend. We were in a tent at the top of a canyon about to fall asleep when we heard large footsteps outside of our tent. It was an animal. After making a couple of circles around our tent, whatever it was started tearing at the ground near our tent. Must have been about a meter away, if not closer. My girlfriend asked me what it was. A deer, I replied. She told me to look out the top of the tent with the light to check no because it's a deer, and if it's not a deer I don't want to know what it is. I'm pretty sure no one else was around. I have a friend that has 40 acres outside of town that he has slowly converted into a subsistence farm for his family years ago. When he mostly only had a dozen or so chickens out there, I spent a few months living on the property in a tent while I was between seasonal work at the time. When the incident occurred, I had been living out there for about 2 months, so I was well used to the sounds of nature outside my tent. At night I had gotten to the point where I wouldn't even bother to get out of the tent and look if I heard a small animal walking past my tent at night. I had even gotten used to the sound that the roof of the pump house made when the wind blew hard from the southeast. My friend had been short on nails when he was building the roof over. When the wind stopped, it was about 200 feet away from my tent, so it had caused me to jump a bit when I first moved out there, but within a month, it had just become another sound outside my tent at night. It was even sort of comforting. Like some people that live in big cities say that they can't sleep without the sound of traffic outside their window. It probably helped that the sound was always paired with the sound of wind blowing through the trees. So one night I'm tucked in my sleeping bag starting to drift off when I hear the shed corner come crashing down. Nothing to worry about. But then I hear what sounds like a person mimicking the sound the shed had made right outside my tent. My blood freezes in my veins and my eyes open wide in the darkness, and I hold perfectly still. I know that my friend has already come and gone hours before I am alone on a piece of land that is large enough that there is no reason for a person to accidentally end up next to my tent in the middle of the night. After a few moments, the wind makes the shed roof crash again, and again I heard a person mimic the crashing sound. A few seconds later, I called up and asked if there was anyone there. No response. The shed roof crashed a third time, but this time there was no mimicking sound. I shine my the sound seemed to come from nothing. It's the edge of the wood spot. The sound had been close, and I can see through the brush well enough to tell that there isn't a person hiding behind the bushes and low branches. I'm looking at the ground, and none of the dead leaves look particularly disturbed. I'm trying to figure out how far someone could have moved at a slow enough pace to not again right next to me, where I'm 100% positive there isn't a person standing at the beam on the sound. So I eventually got used to the sound at night as well, but I resented it every time I heard it. The weirdest thing I've had to happen was a full-blown cryptid encounter out in the Joshua Tree, California area. I'll preface this post by explaining a bit about myself. All night so the dark doesn't bug me, and I have a pretty excellent night vision. I don't the panic. I'm a medical professional and a bit of an outdoorsman. I'm a big dude. Say the first encounter I had was in October 22nd, 2005 on a stretch of a back road in the Mojave Desert, and so day of quail season, and I was all tagged up and ready to go hunting. I had a little Jack Russell Terrier. Since I can't own dogs or cats, allergic as all hell, I drove out and parked my Jeep of the bigger one. The intersections, it was a good day and getting a little late, but I hadn't hit my bag limit yet. I decided that I would stay out a bit past sundown to try to bag the last few. I hit my bag limit. The sun had been over the horizon for about an hour. Getting back to the road was easy enough, and following it back to the Jeep was as well. Around the time full twilight set, and I came to an intersection with stop signs in both directions and was getting my bearings when Guns froze mid-trot and immediately starting growling with his hackles up. He was a pretty chill dog, so watching him go from happy little deep to DEFCON 1 so fast was alarming on its own. I scanned the area to see what he might be upset about, because my first guess was Jeff. I said these were each the same width as an average 2-lane city street on the corner opposite the one we were on. I spotted our creature moving with the same general gait as a rooster, but with what clued me in initially was that it wasn't a chicken, was the simple fact that from head to foot, it must have been close to 3 feet tall. Based on body mass, I'd estimate that it weighed about 40 to 50 pounds. I tied a leash to my belt so he wouldn't bolt after it and waited for it to wander off. It loitered on the corner for a minute, then without making so much as a flutter, it made roughly 9 feet standing leap from the ground to perch atop the stop sign. Definitely not a chicken at this point. I decided it was prudent to be armed, so I popped 2 fresh shells in my shotgun. And 2, they were proportionally enormous, meaning it was likely fully nocturnal. I realized that a 3-foot-tall predatory nocturnal 40-pounds animal that can make a 9-foot standing leap was now regarding me from a high perch, albeit from roughly 40 feet away, and then I was in a bad position. I leveled my shotgun and unloaded both barrels. And after the echoes died down, it was still perched at the top of the stop sign, but making uncheer-up noises that sounded a lot like sneezing. I was reloading when it jumped down from the stop sign and ran away from us through the brush on the adjacent corner. I finished reloading, waited until Gus calmed down, and jogged back to the Jeep. On the way back through, I hit my trail lights at the intersection. This had happened that, and saw that the stop sign had definitely been peppered well with shot, and that the majority of it had been centered on the animal. This animal had taken a 9-foot standing leap, soundlessly perched perfectly on a 2 inches square area, and taken 2 12-gauge loads of birdshot center mass and sneezed at me on the way out of town. I told the story to the Spanish-speaking clerk at a local gas station, who laughed and told his co-worker, "You hear that this gyro just ran into El Chupacabra," without bobbing its head. Thanks for listening. The subscribe button and activate the notification bell for more things you don't want to know. Let us know in the comments what you think about these stories.